I never imagined my curiosity would lead me here, I thought as I drove through the winding roads of Texas. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows over the vast, empty landscape. I was eager to explore the abandoned ghost towns that dotted this part of the state. There was something about the desolate beauty and the lingering history that fascinated me. I had heard local legends about the Whitmore twins and their ghost town, a place so eerie and isolated that anyone who stayed overnight was never seen again. The stories were chilling, but my curiosity got the better of me. Despite the warnings, I decided to visit the ghost town and see for myself what secrets it held. As I arrived at the outskirts of the ghost town, I couldn't help but feel a shiver run down my spine. The buildings were dilapidated and overgrown with weeds, the once bustling streets now silent and empty. The only sound was the whisper of the wind as it rustled through the abandoned structures. I parked my car and stepped out, taking in the eerie silence that surrounded me. There was a sense of foreboding in the air, as if the town itself was watching me. I brushed off the feeling and started exploring, my footsteps echoing through the empty streets. Little did I know, my curiosity would soon lead me into a nightmare I would never forget. Everything seemed fine until I noticed something strange, I recounted, my voice tinged with unease. As I ventured deeper into the ghost town, the eerie silence became more pronounced. The dilapidated buildings stood like silent sentinels, their windows dark and empty. I began to notice odd things, shadows flickering in the corners of my vision, strange noises that seemed to come from nowhere, and an oppressive feeling of being watched. Every time I turned around, I expected to see someone, or something, standing behind me, but there was nothing but the empty streets. My footsteps echoed loudly, the sound bouncing off the walls of the abandoned structures. It felt as if the town itself was alive, observing my every move. I found an old, weathered photograph on the ground, showing two young boys with hauntingly familiar faces. The back of the photograph had a scribbled note, "Whitmore Twins, 1932. The air grew colder as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch and move on their own. A sense of unease settled over me, and I knew I had to find shelter for the night. Little did I know, the real terror was only beginning, and my curiosity had already set the wheels of fate in motion. And then I saw them. I whispered, the memory still fresh and vivid. As the night deepened, the ghost town seemed to come alive with shadows and whispers. The once silent streets now echoed with the faint sounds of footsteps and distant murmurs. I decided to take refuge in an old abandoned house that seemed slightly more intact than the others. The creaking floorboards and peeling wallpaper added to the eerie atmosphere. I settled down, trying to ignore the unsettling noises that seemed to grow louder as the night wore on. Just as I was beginning to relax, I heard it, the sound of children laughing, faint but distinct. My heart pounded in my chest as I cautiously approached the window. The moonlight cast long shadows on the empty streets, and there, standing just outside the house, were the Whitmore twins. Their ghostly figures flickered in and out of the shadows, their faces eerily expressionless. They appeared to be around 10 years old, dressed in old-fashioned clothes that looked out of place in the modern world. I tried to call out to them, but my voice caught in my throat. The twins stared at me with hollow eyes, their presence growing more menacing by the second. Before I could react, they vanished into thin air, leaving me shaken and terrified. I knew then that the legends were true, and I was trapped in a nightmare I couldn't escape. I couldn't escape their gaze. My voice trembled as I recounted the terrifying nights that followed my first encounter with the Whitmore twins. Their ghostly figures haunted my every waking moment and invaded my dreams. The eerie silence of the ghost town became oppressive, weighing heavily on my mind. Each night, the faint sounds of children laughing and whispers grew louder, echoing through the empty streets. The sense of being watched intensified, and I began to see the twins' faces everywhere, in the reflections of broken windows, in the flickering shadows cast by the moonlight. Sleep became impossible as disturbing visions and nightmares plagued my nights. One particularly harrowing night, I decided to explore further, hoping to uncover the truth about the Whitmore twins and their connection to the ghost town. As I rummaged through old, decaying documents and photographs, a chilling picture began to emerge. The twins had lived in this town during the Great Depression, and their tragic deaths had left a dark mark on the place. The more I uncovered, the more the oppressive atmosphere seemed to close in around me. I could feel my sanity slipping away as the line between reality and nightmare blurred. The ghost town was no longer just an abandoned place. It had become a living, breathing entity that fed on my fear. I knew I had to confront them. My resolve was the only thing keeping me from falling apart. Determined to survive and uncover the truth, I pored over the old documents and photographs I had found. They revealed a tale of two brothers, the Whitmore twins, who had once lived in the town during the Great Depression. Their lives had been filled with hardship and tragedy. The town, once a thriving community, had fallen into despair. The twins had perished under mysterious circumstances, and their restless spirits had haunted the town ever since. I knew I had to confront them, to break the curse that bound them to this forsaken place. As night fell once more, I steeled myself for the final confrontation. The oppressive atmosphere of the ghost town weighed heavily on me, but I was determined to see it through. I armed myself with the knowledge I had gathered, hoping it would be enough to face the twins and uncover the truth. The clock struck midnight and the town seemed to hold its breath. The familiar, eerie laughter of children echoed through the streets, and the Whitmore twins appeared once again. Their ghostly figures flickered in the moonlight, more menacing than ever. I took a deep breath and stepped forward, ready to confront the spirits that had haunted me for so long. Chapter 6: The Final Stand. This could be the end of my life. My voice quivered with a mixture of fear and resolve. The Whitmore twins stood before me, their ghostly figures flickering in the moonlight. For a moment the eerie laughter ceased, and an unsettling silence enveloped the ghost town. I took a deep breath, preparing myself for the final confrontation. I called out to them, recounting the tragic tale I had uncovered. I spoke of their lives during the Great Depression, the hardships they had faced, and the mysterious circumstances of their deaths. The twins' expressions remained blank, but I could sense a change in the atmosphere, a tension that hung heavily in the air. As I continued, the oppressive feeling grew stronger and the twins began to speak. Their voices were faint and echoing, like whispers carried on the wind. They revealed the curse that bound them to the town, a curse born out of anger and sorrow. They had been betrayed by the very people they had trusted, left to die in the cold darkness of the desert. I pleaded with them, urging them to let go of their anger and find peace. The twins' forms wavered, their ghostly figures becoming more transparent. The air crackled with energy as the curse began to break, but it was not without a cost. The ground beneath me shook, and the ghost town seemed to come alive with a fury. I could feel the life being drained from me, the effort to break the curse taking its toll. With one final plea, I collapsed to the ground, my vision fading. When I awoke, the sun was rising over the horizon, and the ghost town was silent once more. The Whitmore twins were gone, their spirits finally at rest. I had survived, but I knew I would never be the same. The haunting memory of that night would stay with me forever, a dark reminder of the horrors that lurked in the forgotten corners of the world. I never imagined my curiosity would lead me here, I thought as I roamed the cobblestone streets of New Orleans. The city's rich history and vibrant culture had always fascinated me, but it was the tales of haunted mansions that truly piqued my interest. I had heard unsettling stories about the Smiling Sisters, two sisters who only appeared in mirrors and haunted those who saw them forever. The legends were chilling, but my curiosity overpowered my fear. Despite the warnings, I decided to visit one of the most infamous haunted mansions in the city. As I arrived at the entrance of the Grand Mansion, a shiver ran down my spine. The building was a magnificent relic of the past, but it exuded an eerie aura. The air was thick with the scent of old wood and mustiness, and the shadows seemed to dance in the dim light. I pushed open the creaking front door and stepped inside. The mansion was a labyrinth of antique furniture, dusty chandeliers, and intricate woodwork. It felt as if time had stood still within these walls. Little did I know, my curiosity had led me into a nightmare I could never have imagined. Everything seemed fine until I noticed something strange. I began, my voice reflecting the eerie feeling of that day. As I wandered through the mansion, I couldn't help but admire the grandeur of the place. The high ceilings, ornate chandeliers, and intricate woodwork spoke of a time long gone. But soon I began to notice subtle, unsettling changes. At first it was just fleeting glimpses, shadows that didn't match reality, reflections in mirrors that seemed off. I brushed it off as my imagination playing tricks on me, but the feeling of being watched grew stronger with each passing moment. The mansion's atmosphere became oppressive, the air thick with a sense of foreboding. As I moved from room to room, I stumbled upon old photographs and documents that hinted at the tragic history of the mansion. Two sisters, always smiling in every photograph, their eyes filled with an unsettling mirth. I felt a chill run down my spine as I realized these were the smiling sisters of legend. The whispers and soft laughter began to echo through the empty halls, growing louder with each step. The walls seemed to close in on me, and I knew I had to confront whatever was haunting this place. And then I saw them. My voice trembled as I recalled that haunting moment. As night fell, the mansion seemed to come alive with whispers and soft laughter that echoed through the empty halls. The eerie atmosphere grew thicker, wrapping around me like a shroud. I wandered into a grand room with an antique mirror that dominated one wall. It was an exquisite piece, its ornate frame tarnished with age. I stood before it trying to steady my nerves. But as I looked into the mirror, my breath caught in my throat. There they were, the smiling sisters. Their reflections appeared beside mine, their faces twisted into unnerving smiles. They looked just as they did in the old photographs, two young women with identical features, their eyes gleaming with a sinister light. Their smiles were unnaturally wide, as if frozen in an eternal, mocking grin. My heart pounded in my chest and a chill ran down my spine. I tried to rationalize what I was seeing, convincing myself it was a trick of the light or my imagination. But as I moved, their reflections moved with me, their eyes never leaving mine. Panic surged through me and I stumbled back from the mirror. The sisters' laughter echoed in my ears, growing louder and more menacing. I realized then that the legends were true. I had seen the smiling sisters and now they would never leave me. I couldn't escape their gaze. My voice quivered as I recounted the days that followed my first encounter with the smiling sisters. Their unnerving reflections haunted my every moment, both waking and sleeping. The oppressive atmosphere of the mansion weighed heavily on my mind, amplifying my fear. Each time I glanced into a mirror, they were there, their sinister smiles mocking me. It felt as though their eyes were boring into my soul, unraveling my sanity thread by thread. The whispers and soft laughter grew louder, echoing through the empty halls, filling my mind with dread. Sleep became a distant memory as disturbing visions and nightmares plagued my nights. I saw the smiling sisters lurking in every shadow, their smiles widening as they drew closer. During the day, the mansion's oppressive presence made me question my own sanity. Was this real, or was it all a figment of my imagination? Desperate for answers, I delved deeper into the mansion's history. The old documents and photographs revealed a harrowing tale of two sisters who had once lived there, their lives marred by tragedy and despair. Their eternal smiles were a mask for the pain and suffering they had endured. As the days passed, the line between reality and nightmare blurred, and I could feel myself slipping into madness. The mansion was no longer just an abandoned relic, it had become a living entity that fed on my fear. I knew I had to find a way to escape before it consumed me entirely. I knew I had to confront them. The weight of the mansion's oppressive atmosphere was almost too much to bear. The smiling sisters were everywhere, their haunting reflections following me in every mirror. I realized that I couldn't escape their grasp unless I faced them head-on and uncovered the truth behind their curse. Determined to survive, I gathered all the information I could find from the old documents and photographs. The sisters had once been the belles of New Orleans society, their beauty and charm masking a dark secret. Their tragic deaths had left them trapped in the mirrors, eternally haunting anyone who saw them. As night fell once more, I steeled myself for the final confrontation. The mansion seemed to hold its breath as I approached the grand antique mirror where I had first seen the sisters. My heart raced, but I was resolved to see it through. The familiar, eerie laughter echoed through the halls as I stood before the mirror. The smiling sisters appeared once again, their sinister grins widening as they sensed my fear. I took a deep breath and confronted them, speaking aloud the tragic story I had uncovered. Their expressions shifted, their smiles faltering as they listened. For a moment I thought I had reached them, but their eyes remained cold and unfeeling. The air crackled with tension as I pleaded with them to find peace and let go of their anger. The sisters' laughter grew louder, and I knew the final struggle was upon me. I had to find a way to break the curse and escape the mansion's grip before it was too late. This could be the end of my life. I could barely breathe as I faced the smiling sisters in front of the grand antique mirror. Their eerie grins were wider than ever, and the air was thick with tension. The mansion seemed to hold its breath, the oppressive silence amplifying my fear. I took a deep breath and began to recite the tragic story of the sisters, my voice trembling with emotion. They had been betrayed by those they trusted, their lives cut short by jealousy and rage. Their eternal smiles were a mask for the pain and suffering they had endured. For a moment, the sisters' expressions shifted, their smiles faltering as they listened. The oppressive atmosphere seemed to lighten, and I thought I might have reached them. But as I continued, their eyes grew cold and unfeeling once more. The sinister laughter echoed through the halls, louder and more menacing. The final struggle began as the sisters' reflections seemed to come alive, reaching out from the mirror with twisted hands. I fought with every ounce of strength I had, swinging the makeshift weapon I had brought. The air crackled with energy as the battle raged on, the sisters' ghostly forms flickering and wavering. Desperate to break the curse, I smashed the mirror with all my might. The glass shattered into 1,000 pieces, and the sisters' laughter turned into agonized screams. The room was filled with a blinding light, and I was thrown back by the force of the explosion. When I regained consciousness, the mansion was silent once more. The oppressive atmosphere had lifted, and the smiling sisters were gone. I stumbled out of the mansion, my body bruised and battered, but I had survived. The memory of that night would haunt me forever, a dark reminder of the horrors that lurked in the forgotten corners of the world. I had escaped the smiling sisters, but their twisted smiles would always be etched in my mind, a chilling reminder of the nightmare I had endured. And I knew that somewhere in the shadows, they were waiting for their next victim. I never imagined my curiosity would lead me here, I thought as I drove through the rugged outskirts of Sydney. The sun was setting, casting a warm glow over the dusty landscape. I had always been fascinated by the abandoned mining towns that dotted this region, remnants of a bygone era. Their desolate beauty and mysterious history drew me in like a moth to a flame. I had heard chilling stories about the Holloway cannibals, a mining family that supposedly still lived in one of these ghost towns, preying on anyone who dared to venture too close. The tales were terrifying, but my curiosity got the better of me. Despite the warnings, I decided to visit the ghost town and uncover the truth. As I arrived at the entrance of the old mining town, a shiver ran down my spine. The buildings were crumbling and overgrown with weeds, their windows dark and empty. The only sound was the whisper of the wind as it rustled through the abandoned structures. There was an eerie stillness in the air, as if the town itself was holding its breath. I parked my car and stepped out, taking in the oppressive silence that surrounded me. The feeling of being watched was overwhelming, but I brushed it off and began to explore. My footsteps echoed through the empty streets, and I couldn't shake the sense that I was not alone. Little did I know, my curiosity had led me into a nightmare I would never escape. Everything seemed fine until I noticed something strange. I recalled the eerie stillness of the abandoned mining town still fresh in my mind. As I ventured deeper into the town, the oppressive silence became almost unbearable. The dilapidated buildings loomed over me, their windows like dark, empty eyes watching my every move. I began to notice odd things, faint whispers that seemed to come from nowhere, shadows flickering at the edge of my vision, and an overwhelming feeling of being watched. My footsteps echoed unnaturally loud in the empty streets, amplifying the sense of isolation. As I explored, I stumbled upon an old, crumbling house. Inside, I found photographs and documents that hinted at the tragic history of the Holloway family. The photographs showed a once thriving family of miners, their faces slowly succumbing to despair and madness. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows that seemed to move on their own. The air grew colder, and an oppressive atmosphere settled over the town. I felt a shiver run down my spine as I realized that something was not right. The town felt alive, as if it had a dark secret it was waiting to reveal. The sense of unease was palpable, but I pressed on, determined to uncover the truth behind the legends of the Holloway cannibals. And then I saw them. I whispered, the memory still fresh and haunting. As night fell, the mining town seemed to take on a life of its own. The eerie silence was broken by unsettling noises emanating from the abandoned mine. The sound of footsteps and distant, echoing whispers sent chills down my spine. I decided to investigate the source of the noises, my heart pounding in my chest. As I approached the entrance of the old mine, I saw glimpses of movement in the shadows. The dim light of my flashlight barely penetrated the darkness, but it was enough to see them, the Holloway family. Their faces were twisted and gaunt, their eyes glinting with a predatory hunger. They moved silently, their ghostly forms flickering in and out of the darkness. Panic surged through me, but I tried to rationalize what I was seeing. Surely, it had to be my imagination playing tricks on me. As I backed away, I heard a low growl, a sound that made my blood run cold. The Holloway family members stepped closer, their movements deliberate and menacing. I turned and fled, my only thought being to escape the nightmare that had become all too real. Back in the relative safety of the old house, I tried to catch my breath. My mind raced with fear and confusion. The legends were true, the Holloway cannibals were real, and I was trapped in their territory. I knew I had to find a way out before it was too late. I couldn't escape their gaze. My voice trembled as I recounted the horrifying nights that followed my first encounter with the Holloway cannibals. Their twisted faces and predatory eyes haunted my every waking moment and invaded my dreams. The oppressive silence of the ghost town weighed heavily on my mind, amplifying my fear. Each night, the unsettling noises grew louder. The sound of footsteps, whispers, and low growls echoed through the empty streets, filling me with a sense of dread. The feeling of being watched intensified, and I began to see the Holloway family members lurking in the shadows, their gaunt figures flickering in the dim light. Sleep became impossible as disturbing visions and nightmares plagued my nights. I saw the Holloway cannibals closing in on me, their eyes filled with a hunger that sent chills down my spine. During the day, the oppressive atmosphere of the ghost town made me question my sanity. Was this real, or was it just my mind playing tricks on me? Desperate for answers, I delved deeper into the history of the Holloway family. The old documents and photographs revealed a harrowing tale of a once thriving mining family driven to madness and cannibalism by desperation and isolation. Their tragic fate had left a dark mark on the town, turning it into a place of horror and despair. As the days passed, the line between reality and nightmare blurred, and I could feel my sanity slipping away. The ghost town was no longer just an abandoned place. It had become a living, breathing entity that fed on my fear. I knew I had to find a way to escape before it consumed me entirely. I knew I had to confront them. My determination was the only thing keeping me from succumbing to the terror that gripped me. I realized that I couldn't outrun the Holloway cannibals forever. To survive, I needed to face them and uncover the truth about their twisted existence. I revisited the old documents and photographs, piecing together the tragic history of the Holloway family. They had been a proud mining family, but desperation and isolation had driven them to cannibalism. Their dark legacy had cursed the town, turning it into a place of horror and despair. As night fell once more, I steeled myself for the final confrontation. I armed myself with whatever makeshift weapons I could find, a rusty mining pickaxe, an old lantern, and sheer determination. The oppressive atmosphere of the ghost town weighed heavily on me, but I was resolved to see it through. The clock struck midnight, and the town seemed to hold its breath. The familiar, unsettling noises echoed through the empty streets, and I knew the Holloway cannibals were near. My heart raced as I made my way towards the abandoned mine, the place where their dark descent had begun. In the dim light of my lantern, I saw them, the Holloway family, their gaunt figures illuminated by the flickering glow. Their eyes glinted with a predatory hunger, and I knew there was no turning back. I took a deep breath, ready to confront the horrors that awaited me in the darkness. This could be the end of my life. My voice quivered as I recalled the terrifying confrontation with the Holloway cannibals. Their gaunt, twisted figures loomed in the dim light of my lantern, their eyes glinting with a predatory hunger. The abandoned mine, once a place of prosperity, had become a dark lair for the cursed family. The air was thick with tension as I faced the Holloway family. Their leader, a skeletal figure with hollow eyes, stepped forward. His voice was a rasping whisper, recounting the tragic events that had driven them to cannibalism. Desperation, isolation, and madness had consumed them, turning them into the monsters they had become. I tried to reason with them, pleading for my life and offering to help them find peace. But their hunger was too great, their minds too far gone. The fight for survival began as they lunged at me with an unnatural speed. I swung the rusty pickaxe, narrowly missing their grasp. The fight was brutal, a desperate struggle for life. I could feel my strength waning, the oppressive atmosphere of the ghost town sapping my energy. With every swing and every dodge, I knew my chances of survival were slipping away. In a final, desperate attempt, I used the lantern to set the old, decaying wooden beams of the mine on fire. The flames quickly spread, casting flickering shadows on the walls. The Holloway family recoiled, momentarily distracted by the blaze. Seizing the opportunity, I fled the mine, my heart pounding in my chest. As I emerged into the cold night air, the mine collapsed behind me, trapping the Holloway cannibals inside. I stumbled away, barely able to keep my footing. The ghost town was silent once more, the oppressive weight lifted, but the horrors I had witnessed would haunt me forever. I had survived, but I knew I would never be the same. The memory of the Holloway cannibals and their twisted faces would stay with me, a dark reminder of the nightmare that lurked in the forgotten corners of the world. And I knew that somewhere in the darkness, the Holloway cannibals still waited for their next victim.